are actually ready to start. And if anyone else joined, welcome to today's webinar. We wanted to arrange today's webinar because there's been so much happening in the background with agencies and with Facebook preparing for a really big change. And we've ourselves have been kind of struggling to get good material and get the answers. So we wanted to set up a webinar to go through practical tips and practical advice of what is happening. So today's webinar will be about how to prepare for a cookieless world and overcoming the iOS browser and cookie restrictions for Facebook advertisers. And we're really happy to have Adabara from Acquire Marketing here, and he's going to walk us through some really practical advice on actually what to do and how to prepare for this massive change that will change the digital marketing landscape as we know it. So let's jump into it. Adabara, next slide. So what is actually happening? You'll see that there's this push notification being sent from Tim Cook. And basically in June 2020, Apple decided that they want to restrict the way that mobile devices and apps specifically track customers throughout the mobile landscape. So you'll see here that most customers who will have the new iOS 14 iPhone and iPad devices will get faced with this push notification that asks, allow Facebook to track your activity across other companies and apps and websites. And we presume that most customers will go, no, I don't actually want Facebook to be tracking me across all my apps and devices, which in that case, this is going to have a massive impact on how we as advertisers can track customers once they leave the Facebook app. At the moment, Facebook has a lot of flexibility around tracking customers once they leave the app and move to a website or a different app. So next slide. So it's important to know who will be impacted, and it will be everyone. So don't think that we live in a silo where you will not be impacted. Basically, all apps will be impacted, not just Facebook. But Facebook have been proactive in terms of preparing for this change. Other platforms such as TikTok, Snapchat, Amazon, all of them will be impacted as well. So the way that data is going to be collected is changing for good with advertising, and it will impact things like personalization services. Google, so far as we know, will not be as impacted as Facebook, since most customers don't always use apps to access browsers like Google Chrome, but this does not exclude Google. And if we look at mobile traffic, it will still be impacted. So I'm going to go through just how and what we can do. So what will be impacted on Facebook specifically? It will be tracking. So first of all, how we track customers and how we track success, that will change for good. And you already might have seen, if you're a Facebook advertiser, that Facebook has now completely phased out the 28-day click attribution window, making the 7-day click attribution window preliminary. So that's already a change that's coming. Facebook has also started enforcing every single business that advertise on Facebook to verify their domain and also prioritize their conversion events. So every single domain will only receive 8 events to track across the businesses. The second thing that will be impacted is the percentage of sales and leads attributed to Facebook. So if you see a massive drop-off once this change is implemented, don't be surprised, as obviously Facebook won't have the same visibility around how effective campaigns will be. And that will naturally impact your audiences. So we build a lot of audiences on how they interact with your website. So this will no longer be possible. And in the long run, this will impact audience sizes as well and who you can retarget to. And then naturally that will impact campaign optimization. So your campaigns won't necessarily receive as many events as before and not as many conversions, which will naturally mean that over time, your campaigns might not be as optimized as they are now, resulting in higher costs on the platform. So I'll just quickly go through some things that we as a team have come together to try caveat some of these changes. So how are we preparing? With Adabara and his team, we're looking into the conversion API for customers, and he'll take you through everything what it covers and what it means. The second thing is using Facebook specific codes to track value and conversion. So you could have a very unique code that only gets used on your Facebook ads or any other, have a code for any specific other apps such as TikTok, Snapchat. And so in your backend, you'll be able to track the real value of that platform and how many customers have seen it without Facebook telling you how many conversions you've received. So that's very important. You can also use unique UTM tagging and URL parameters attached to your URL. And if this can pull into your CRM, you'll be able to have another source to compare kind of notes with Facebook. Using third-party sources for audience building. So it's more important than ever that you have a third-party source that you can build audiences with. So this means that if you have an email CRM that you're using, make sure you integrate this with Facebook and put back and upload your custom audiences back into the system so Facebook can gather learnings. Adjust your targets for each platform. So as we said, your campaigns won't be as optimized as before, your audiences will be smaller, and naturally you won't be able to record as many conversions as before. So your targets and what you're expecting from the platform needs to change, and have that conversation with whoever's managing your Facebook ads for you, or if it's yourself. You can have a look at the percentage of customers coming from Apple iOS devices and customers who've also bought beyond 7 days, so between 7-day and 28-day click, to understand what the drop-off will be once this change is implemented. Run more video ads. So it's really important that, again, you find different sources to build audiences on the platform as well. So on Facebook, if you're running video ads, you'll be able to retarget customers who've seen your video at a percentage or watched a percentage of your video, which is going to be really important for you to make sure your audience size continues to be quite large and enough to retarget to. And same with setting up your Facebook shop. So we're obviously pushing towards a world of social commerce. So it's more important than ever to set up a Facebook and Instagram shop. And you can also retarget customers on how they're interacting with these shops. So beyond your webpage as well. And these are just a few practical tips of what our team is currently implementing for customers. But if there's any questions, we'll open it up in the end to see. I'm going to hand over now to Adabara that will take us more through the conversion API and what does that mean. Thank you, Adabara.
Thank you, Jen. So hi, my name is Adabara, and my company is called Acquire, and Acquire is an advertising technology company, and we are focused on the technical implementation of Facebook technical tools, so things like the Pixel or Convergence API and other technical tools. Today, I'll talk a little bit more about these industry changes and what they mean. I'll talk a little bit about the impact of these changes to advertisers, and then I'll talk about Convergence API. So hopefully by the end of this session, you should get a good sort of feel and understanding of what's going on and why you need to take action now. And I've put a couple of my credentials here, not to gloat, but hopefully to get you to see that hopefully some of this knowledge is coming from a position of at least some expertise. So please do try and stick around to the end. Hopefully I should be speaking for about 20 minutes. So what is going on, right? The ads ecosystem is changing, and you don't want to be left behind. These changes, if you do not adapt to them, will impact your ability to reach people who have expressed an interest in your brand or your company. So I think in the context of Facebook, it's really your ability to build custom audiences. If you don't adapt to these changes, you will find it a lot more difficult to deliver ads that feel relevant or useful to customers. And again, in this day and age, consumers, customers, want to have interaction that is personalized. So that'll be tougher without adapting to these changes. Another thing that will be at risk is optimizing your ads for conversion. So Jean mentioned this already. And also accurately measuring and reporting on your campaign results, right? Okay, so these are 4 items that are going to become at risk if you don't adapt to these changes. So what are these changes? First of all, people are demanding more privacy. So today, advertising is, people experience advertising in a personalized format. And this personalization is driven by data and machine learning and AI. And in a way, it's a good thing because, it allows you to deliver the right message to the right customer at the right time. However, there are concerns about how this data has been, collected or is being collected, and that is leading to some of these changes. So there is a balancing act between, personalization and privacy. And I think the sticking point is really around how the data is being collected. So that's one. The second is that governments are passing data restrictions. So there's a legal element to this. We might all have heard about GDPR in Europe. In the US, there's the California Consumer Privacy Act, the CCPA. And there are other similar regulations elsewhere in the world. Now this point on regulation is very important, because if you don't comply, or if you run advertising in such a way that falls foul of these regulations, it could be quite expensive in terms of fines, your reputation. So it's important to do advertising in a compliant way. So this is also helping to drive the changes we're seeing in advertising. So this is leading web browsers really to enact policies that limit or block the use of cookies. So at the end of this year, at the end of 2021, most browsers will have blocked all third-party cookies by default. And I'll look at some specific examples, as well as limiting the lifespan of something called first-party cookies. So what are third-party cookies? Third-party cookies are cookies that are set on a website other than the one you're currently on. So, for example, if I'm a consumer and I go on Vodafone's website to look for a mobile phone contract, while I'm on their website, their website will put some cookies on my browser. And then maybe later on, if I go on CNN to read an article, I might see an ad from BT, advertising a mobile phone package to me based on those cookies that Vodafone put on my browser. So third-party cookies are cookies that were set or collected by a third party or a company or a brand that I don't have a direct connection to. And first-party cookies are cookies that are set on the website that I am currently on. So I just want to put that into context. But these third-party cookies are being blocked, and the lifespan of first-party cookies are being restricted. So why is that important, right? So, I mean, I'll look at a specific example with Safari in a moment, but one of the other changes is that device manufacturers are changing their operating system protocols. So I think one of the more common ones that everyone is talking about is the iOS operating system. So with iOS 14 plus coming out in Q2, so anytime this spring, there will be changes in terms of how advertisers or app developers can track users of the app, so that's bringing changes in the Apple ecosystem. But let's look at some specific examples. Let's start with Safari, right? Safari is a browser that is owned by Apple. If you use an iPhone, it's you probably be familiar with Safari, but they're also on desktop as well. Safari was one of the first browsers to come out with cookie restrictions. So a couple of years ago, they came out with something called ITP, Intelligent Tracking Prevention, that blocked third-party cookies by default. And then last year, they came out with ITP 2.2. And what that does is that it cuts the lifespan of first-party cookies to 1 day. So this is first-party cookies now, not even third-party. And what it means is that, you know, if someone is using the Safari browser and they come on your website, you know, you run an ad, you target them, they come on your website, maybe they have a look around, they don't convert, and maybe they come back a couple of days later, because the lifespan of that cookie is down to just 1 day, 24 hours, right? You're not going to know it's the same person, which affects your attribution. So I think, yeah, Apple is probably one of the companies that are sort of ahead of the curve in terms of, you know, coming down hard on these privacy changes. So that's a Safari browser. And then there's Apple's iOS operating system, where they've come out with a new policy called the App Tracking Transparency Policy that requires app developers to ask, users if they want to be tracked in order, before they can collect any information about the tracking activity. And so that's coming out in Q2, and you know, we expect that to bring a lot of big changes in terms of what advertisers can use in terms of the Apple's identifiers. So a lot of data, and this is probably more for app ad advertisers. There's a lot of things that we won't be able to do in the same way. And then third is Google, right? Google Chrome. You know, depending on what report you read, Chrome is anywhere from 70 to 80% of the browser market. So that's the big player here in terms of browsers. And Apple has said that they will not support third-party cookies at the end of this year. So as we go into 2022, so that will really bring big changes. You know, there might be some of you on the call here thinking, you know, everyone's talking about changes. You know, I've not noticed anything. Nothing is different. Some of you might already be noticing attribution issues, but I think when these changes from Google kick in, and also Apple as well in this second quarter, you know, these changes will become more, you'll notice the effect a little bit more, which is why, you know, you probably want to start doing things now to prepare and adapt to these changes. Okay, so I want to give you a very quick case study example of how things work today with cookies and how things are going to change, right? So this is a quick demonstration here. So let's say we have Jake, who is browsing through Facebook or some ad platform, and then they see an ad based on some third-party cookie targeting. And then Jake comes on your website based on those third-party targeting. Jake arrives on your website, you know, the pixel fires, the cookie records the information. Jake doesn't convert, you know, he leaves. And then a week later, maybe he sees more targeted content based on his interaction on your website, you know, the first time, and then clicks and comes on your website again. Again, the cookie records it. You know, this is Jake's second visit to your website. Jake, you know, completes the purchase, he converts, everything looks good, right? So everything is being tracked across the board. This is how things work today, or this is how things work with cookies, third-party cookies enabled. However, in future, what will happen is that when Jake sees your ad on Facebook, If it's due to, third-party tracking, if he clicks and comes onto your website, the pixel will fire. However, any sort of third-party cookies that were set from, based on him will not trigger. So if he leaves your website and then comes back another day to try and do the purchase this time, maybe he wants to think about it for a while, and then he comes back, a week later and does the purchase. First of all, because the third-party cookies did not fire, okay, it's going to be recorded as a second new visit, right? So if he completes the purchase, you wouldn't be able to attribute that purchase back to the original ad. So this is an example of how using third-party cookies will not, will impact the measurement and the attribution of your campaigns. There was some research done by DigiDay in Germany, apparently in Germany, and they focused on Safari users in particular, because these third-party cookie changes are already in place. And based on that, on the research work, they found that with third-party cookies being blocked, they saw advertisers saw a 30% tracking and attribution loss, as well as a 20% less perceived return on ad spend, which then saw certain advertisers obviously cutting their budget for these channels by about 10%, and then experiencing a 15% revenue loss. Now, this was based on a specific study in Germany. So that's not to say, the results in the UK will be exactly the same. They could be worse or better, but the key point here is that we're moving to a world where things are becoming increasingly digital, and selling and reaching your customers is happening more and more online. So you don't want a situation where you are losing revenue in this digital age. If anything, your revenue should be going up. But if you don't adapt to these changes, then you might see that revenue loss. So what's the way forward? And I'm going to, as Jean mentioned earlier, this is something that impacts everyone, right? It's not just Facebook or Google, it's across the board. However, I'm going to focus here specifically for Facebook advertisers, just to caveat that. And the answer really is to move to a first-party data strategy. And what does first-party data mean? First-party data means data that you have collected directly from your audience, directly from your customers, people who have engaged on your social media pages, rather than relying on cookies or relying on sources that you didn't collect directly, okay? And implementing a first-party data strategy, comes in many, many different forms. Again, each channel is different, but I want to talk about it purely from a Facebook standpoint. And implementing a first-party data strategy with Facebook really involves adopting Convergence API. So Convergence API lets you drive desired outcomes, or whether it's sales or leads, etc., using information that you control, information that you own, information that you've been given consent by your customers to use, instead of relying on data from a browser. Okay, so another illustration here, the chart at the top is showing how things work with a regular Facebook pixel. And the way it works is that when a customer comes on your website, the Facebook pixel will run on the browser, and then from the browser, it will try and send data to the ad platform, say Facebook, in this occasion. Now, doing things that way is subject to certain issues. Number one, connectivity issues. If someone is going on your website and trying to do a transaction, or there's like a blip with the Wi-Fi, or the network breaks down temporarily, then that information might not get sent, and that pixel data might not get received by Facebook. The same goes with loading errors. I think based on what we've been talking about today, the loss of cookie support will also impact your ability to pass data onto your ad platform based on their interaction on your website. With Convergence API, the way it works is that a customer comes on your website, and then the events don't get run by the pixel on the browser. Instead, the events get fired from your server, and it gets fired from your server and sent to Facebook via Convergence API. And some of you might be wondering, but I don't have a server. What does a server mean? Like a server is something as simple as creating an account on Google Cloud or AWS and setting this up. But that's probably a conversation for another time. But Convergence API is the way forward because it follows a first-party data approach and does not rely on cookies at all. So there is no information from cookies that is being leveraged with the Convergence API, which is a server-side tracking approach. So I want to highlight a couple of benefits of Convergence API. And the first is that it gives you strengthened web data reliability. What does that mean? That means that, today with the pixel, as I mentioned earlier, that there are issues with connectivity issues, Wi-Fi issues, certain people having ad blockers on their browser that prevents the pixel from firing, the loss of cookie support and so on. So there are a lot of reasons why, this data is not shared with Facebook or your other ad provider in a reliable way. And the thing is, you need reliable data in order to build your custom audiences, in order to optimize your ads. If you have good custom audiences, then your cost per acquisition will likely go down because there are more relevant people to reach. You can attribute your campaigns, the performance of your campaigns more effectively, and so on and so forth. It's just better campaign performance, right? So if you want your ad budget to work the best that it can for you, then you definitely want to implement Convergence API at some point this year, because going into next year, when these changes fully kick in, your ad performance, will likely suffer. The second is that Convergence API enables full funnel visibility. So there are, a lot of advertisers that have multiple channels that they do make their sales. The website is one. It could be the website. There's the app. If it's a retailer, you've got physical stores. It could be the telephone and the call centers and so on and so forth. So how do you sort of consolidate the signals or sales from all these different channels and utilize that in your ads targeting? In fact, let me give you an example. So let's say you're an let's say you're an advertiser and you run campaigns optimized for leads, right? So you run Facebook campaigns and someone fills out a form and you get the leads. And then those leads come into your internal systems, and then you get your salespeople on the phone calling up the leads, trying to convert the leads into, sales. And then, for these leads that are converting to sales, then, you book the revenue, and that revenue sits in your CRM, say Salesforce. Okay. As an advertiser, really, you want to optimize for the event that is as low in the funnel as possible. But if you only optimize, or if you can only capture the leads on your website, how can you run ads optimized for the sale or the purchase? Because that information is in Salesforce, right? It's not on your website, or it doesn't touch your website. So with Convergence API, you can integrate your CRM, your Salesforce, into into your Facebook account, into the pixel. You know, Jean said something about email lists, right? You got like MailChimp, or you got different, you know, customer lists, you know, in different places. Yeah, you can try and upload them manually, but you can automate that process with Convergence API. So Convergence API just allows you to, you know, gather the signals and data from other sources apart from your website, because the pixel really only sits on your website, but there could be stuff happening elsewhere, and you want to use that information to optimize your ads, and Conversion API helps you do that. The third is establishing data control. Data control is particularly important from a privacy and compliance standpoint. So data control means that, you know, with Conversions API, you can choose what data to send and when to send it. Earlier, I talked about the California Consumer Privacy Act, the CCPA, which basically says that, you know, if people, California residents, you cannot use their data to track them or to advertise to them. With Conversions API, you can set up the events in such a way where if there are people, you know, visiting your website from California, or, you know, you set up a flag not to use their information to target them. Or you might have other customers where, you know, they don't want you to use their personal information, like their name or their email or their personal identifiers to track them. They don't want you to do that, but they still want a personalized experience with your brand, and are happy for you to maybe use the IP address of their computer to show them personalized content. So you can pick and choose what data parameters to use to track a user with Conversions API. So depending on your privacy policy, you know, depending on what you've agreed with your customers, you can then tailor the data gathering process or how you collect the data to fit that privacy policy. So you can only do that with Conversions API. With the regular pixel, you know, there are certain things that are just collected automatically, like, you know, the user agent, for example, or the IP address of the browser. You don't have a choice of editing that, but with Conversions API, you can pick and choose. So these are just some examples here. But if you remember what I said at the start in terms of what is at risk with these changes, you know, your ability to target people who have shown an interest in your brand, your ability to run personalized ads, you know, and so on and so forth. This is how Conversion API fixes those issues. You know, the ability to track, to collect data on how people are converting on the website without using third-party cookies. Again, Conversions API fixes that. Just a quick point on security with Conversions API. Any data that is sent to Facebook with Conversions API is hashed. By hash, it means it's encrypted using some, you know, advanced cryptographic algorithms. And any data that is sent to Facebook with Conversions API is deleted after the matching process. So what does that mean? What that means is that if someone comes on your website, they make a purchase, right? With Conversions API, you want to say, okay, this person made a purchase, and you're passing that to Facebook. What Facebook does is that Facebook checks its own database to see if that person exists in Facebook. If that person exists in Facebook, then Facebook will put a tick mark in your custom audience to say, yes, this person made a purchase, and then will delete all the information you sent. If Facebook cannot find that person in their database, then they will just delete the data anyway. So they don't actually store a lot of what you send them. They just use it for their matching process. Why you should adopt Conversions API now? First of all, is the, you know, I've used the term cookie extinction, but, you know, that's really what's happening, right? You know, so cookies are no longer viable for digital user identification. And by the end of this year, you know, there will be, you won't be able to rely on cookies anymore. I mean, at the moment, you probably are still, you know, relying on cookies, but by the end of this year, you won't be able to anymore, especially with the Google Chrome changes. But also, it might take some time, right? You know, depending on the size of your company, the buy-in to make such a change is a technical change. So it might require buy-in from like different teams, different departments, etc., legal, compliance, IT, marketing. So you want to start having those conversations now and sort of getting ready for, to look at a possible integration. The challenges with convergence API it's quite technical because this is a server-to-server integration. So it will require back-end engineering resources. And even when you have back-end engineers, they also need to at least understand how the API works. And so it could be a little bit time consuming and sort of quite technical if you don't have those resources. So this is where we come in, right? I mean, we are Facebook certified advertising API developers. Like, we know Facebook has certified us for all their API products. So if you don't have technical resources, or if those technical resources don't fully understand the Facebook API products, so we can come in and help you integrate these products in a seamless way, and in a way where you don't have to do anything technical at all. The certification here is called the Facebook Advertising API Developer certification. So, I mean, even if you don't end up working with us, if you wanted to partner with another company, you want to ask and find out that they will see that they at least have this certification. In our company, everyone has the certification. And that's it, right? So these are my slides. This is my contact details. If off the back of this webinar, you want to explore an integration, then that's my email address, that's my number, and we'll be happy, or you could speak to Jane as well, and maybe we can set up a call. But if you run ads on Facebook, you spend money on Facebook, yeah, you want to implement Convergence API as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adebara. I know from my own experience, that was probably the most comprehensive guide to the conversion API and what's happening in the advertising kind of landscape, because it's definitely changing, and it's good to know actually how to prepare. So thank you so much for everything you've put together. I'm now going to open it up to questions. So we'll see if we have any questions. Please feel free to use this time now to ask, or as Adebara said, if you want to get in touch afterwards and rewatch this recording, because we'll definitely send this recording to everyone to rewatch. I know there's a lot to take in. Then feel free to also reach out to us directly at Push or to Adebara and Acquire Marketing. Seems that you must have answered everyone's questions, which is always a good thing. So no questions yet. I'll give it another minute. One question I have actually from my end, and this is a question we get from customers we've dealt with as well. So I think sometimes there's this misinterpretation of what the platform is actually reporting on revenue and what's actually sitting in your back end. So for instance, if I'm running a Shopify site, Facebook might not be reporting on this revenue, but actually that revenue is still coming into your shop, right? So that's the kind of a disconnect. Does the conversion API obviously get around that as well and be able to report on the revenue as the same as it would have with the pixel?
Yes. So within with Convergence, and it's not just Convergence API, also the regular pixel as well. You can add. I don't want to get too technical, but a parameter for the value of the sale in the event that you send with Convergence API to Facebook. So, for example, let's say a purchase comes in and it's for a pair of yellow shoes for £50. You can then send a purchase event that is the name of the product is yellow shoes, and the currency is 50, and the currency is pounds, and the value is 50, and you post that to Facebook, and then you can then use that information to run campaigns for value optimization and other things like that. So yes, the answer is yes. With Convergence API, you can report the revenue from your store or your website to Facebook and use that in your ads.
Perfect, that's good to know. And with companies that are running advertising in multiple markets that might at the moment have multiple pixels set up for every single market, how does the Conversion API work with multi-market campaigns?
With Convergence API, you can set it up to send the events to as many pixels as you want. One thing to point out though with, and I'm not sure, maybe you might have a better answer than me, but I found that with advertisers that have many different pixels across many different markets, with the new aggregated event measurements where you can only send 8 conversion events per domain, if my advice would be, if there's an opportunity to consolidate those pixels into, especially if it's all under the same domain, then I might want to do that. But yeah, with Convergence API, you can send the information to as many pixels as you want. It's totally up to you. But I know that there are certain advertisers that are having to think about how many pixels they should have in light of this aggregated events measurement.
Yeah, I think from my understanding as well, it's like depends on the domain. So if you've structured your domain in a certain way, we can share that as well. You'll be able to have multiple pixels. So you might be able to have a pixel per market and then have those 8 events per pixel or per market. What we have found is a lot of customers have not necessarily set up their multi-market domains in a certain way, and that kind of restricts them as well to only use 1 pixel and share that across different markets. So that definitely does restrict you to some extent. So that's interesting to know. Well, no questions. So we're going to close the webinar there. And thank you so much for attending, everyone. Like we said, we'll share all the details with you as well as the recording. But I hope everyone's enjoyed a lunchtime session of tracking and cookies. So please feel free to reach out to myself at Push or Adabara if there's any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.